Hey, everybody, welcome to another live. I'm glad to have you with me. Do you want to learn today from a seasoned leader and CEO? Do you want to think about some important lessons for us as leaders and managers? Well, then you're in exactly the right place. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You can get all future live episodes and therefore interact with us and see them sooner if you're listening on the podcast by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. And while you're here, if you're with us live, imagine that you're joining us for a cup of coffee. Just share your questions, your comments, and ideas. I'll be able to see all of those, and all of those will make for a better conversation now and eventually for a better podcast episode for everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Teammate. If you work remotely and want to be more effective, more productive, more engaged, and more connected, this book will help you get there, because there's a big difference between working from home and being an engaged and effective remote teammate. You can learn more and get your copy at longdistanceteammate.com. And without any further ado, let me introduce you to my guest today. There he is. He's there. If you're watching us on video, and you can now see him. His name is Mark Williams. He's the president and CEO of Brokers International, helping insurance agencies and financial professionals grow their businesses. Over his more than 25 years in the financial services industry, he has been both a producing agent in the field and a home office leader, consulting to agencies and field marketing operations and organizations. He's currently focused on the future of the insurance industry. We may talk about that today, from the disruptions of insurtech and robo-advisors to the changing demographics and needs of customers like all of us. He's the author of a book called Lead. Here it is. Lead, Don't Manage. 12 lessons in creating a leadership culture based on core values. Mark, welcome. I'm glad that you're here.
Kevin, thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So thank you very much.
All right. We got folks from the Congo with us. I'll just let everybody see that. So there you go. From Brazzaville in the Congo. And that,
awesome.
and with welcome, Jan. And so everybody, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to talk to you, Mark. I've read the book, and I really want, one of the things you asked me before we went live about how long I've been doing this, and we haven't done them live for all of the time, but we started doing episodes with guests in July of 2016. So we're coming up on 5 years. It's hard to believe. And one of the things that I wanted to do from the very beginning was to create a show where we could have both leadership experts, but also expert leaders. And I'm going to put you in both camps. You're obviously an expert because you wrote a book, but you're a working leader every single day. And in many ways, that's why I wanted to have you here. So before we get into depth about a lot, I'd really like you to just tell us a little bit about your journey. Sort of, I said 25 years in the insurance business as some short form, but you probably didn't come out of school thinking this is where you're going to end up, or you certainly weren't when you were 10, you weren't saying, I think I'm going to be in the insurance agency and write a book, insurance business and write a book. So tell us about your path, a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. So full disclosure, I must admit, I do come from an insurance family.
Well, so I was wrong. I'll be happy to be wrong.
So my father, who will turn 80 this year, is a financial professional, sells insurance products. My mother, for a very short period of time, owned a property and casualty insurance agency. I have a sister who works for a insurance company that we represent. So insurance has always been a part of our family. Holidays are super exciting at our house because we talk about financial planning. Early on in my career, I'll tell a very brief story. When I was 10 years old, I did a book report at school, like a presentation, and it was filling out a life insurance application.
Okay, so everything I did to start was wrong. And I even used age 10. And there you go, everybody.
So full disclosure, was in the service for a number of years, got out of the service, kind of was lost a little bit. And my dad said, go into financial services. So I became a stockbroker 32 years ago. Aging myself now. Did that for a number of years. Then got my insurance license, became an insurance agent, became a manager of insurance agents, and then went to work for a home office. And for many people, that means an insurance company. I represented that company and traveled the country to agencies representing the company and convincing people to sell our products versus our competitors.
Yep.
Flash forward a number of years, I was working for a very large insurance company that owned an agency in Atlanta, which is where I'm from. And I had the opportunity to run that agency. And I did that for a period of about 4 years when I was given another opportunity from our largest competitor, which is the company I run now, Brokers International. And so for the past 7 years, I have been running Brokers International out of Des Moines, Iowa, as president and CEO. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of how I became where I am.
All right. So I want to come back to your history in a sec, but I want to dive in to the title of why we're here, which is Lead, Don't Manage. It's also the title of the book. So I'm going to ask you the question that I think everybody has an opinion on. And I know you do because you wrote about it. But here's the question. What's management versus leadership? Are they the same? Are they different? Again, everyone's got a take. What's your take on that? What do those two words mean to you? How are they the same? How are they different?
Great question. So I can manage my time, or I can determine what I'm going to do with my time. Two very different things. I can manage my employees, their comings and goings, and I can give them a performance review, or I can lead them to become better employees or a better division. And that's really, I view that the day-to-day, the attendance of my employees, maybe their workload, that's managing the employee. Oftentimes, I think that we forget that people, number one, like to, and oftentimes are required to be led somewhere. And therein lies the biggest difference, I think, between managing and leading. But I'll also share with you the biggest impetus for the book was I think there's a lack of training both in management and in leadership. Middle management today, you've become a manager because you're good at your job and you do your job very well. And now the department has gotten bigger. We need to add additional people in your division. And because you knew your job really well, you got to be the manager. I think that's great, but you might not know how to lead people or how to give a correct performance review or provide constructive feedback or be challenging in a very appropriate way.
There's really no might to that, Mark. There's really no might to that. Like, you wouldn't know. If you're a good accountant, how would you know those things? If you're a good engineer, how would you know those things? If you're a good salesperson, how could you possibly know those things, right? Yeah, we're in complete alignment. What you don't know, Mark, is I also co-wrote a book called From Bud to Boss, all about that transition, right? To make that move. So there's no doubt that it's critical. So you're saying then, management and leadership, both part of our jobs, both important, not the same.
100% correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark and I are in agreement. So we can move on from there, and the show is over. Thank you all for playing. No, but here's the thing that I find, Mark, and if you go Google management versus leadership, you'll read first of all, millions of things.
Sure.
But one of the things you get is that management bad, leadership good. I mean, no one says that exactly, but if you read the lists, that's what they're saying. And I think you're exactly right. Both of them are parts of our job. And while we didn't have training in either one, one of the management one is maybe a little more black and white in some ways than the leadership one. Both are super important. I would agree with you. So I didn't really know exactly. I knew from the book that roughly what you were, I had some idea what you were going to say, but I didn't know it would lead in quite so well to this next question. And because you're now a CEO and you sort of took us through your progression, I'd like you to go in the time way back machine to the first time you got that role of being a leader. And I think I'll ask like 3 questions. So I'll just, and then you to frame it. So how did that go for you? What was the thing that you maybe got right early, and what was the biggest mistake that you made?
Sure. So initially, The first time I had people reporting to me was about 18 or 20 years ago. I had 2 direct reports. What went well was I actually received people who knew their jobs very well. So they did make my job easier. So in full disclosure, my first management job, the hierarchy that was built for me was 2 people that were in their role for a number of years. They knew their jobs very well, and quite frankly, didn't need a lot of day-to-day management. So
that made your job way easier.
So I did luck out. Some of the things that didn't go well. I am a very direct individual. To the tune of, it used to be that when my wife would come home and say, hey, how does this look on me? I would tell her directly. What I learned over time is sometimes it's not what I say, but how I say it. And so what didn't go well is my directness really sometimes needs to be massaged a little bit nicer. If I'm providing you feedback, for example, walking in and saying, you're not doing a really good job, probably isn't the best way to approach you. Maybe instead I could say something like, hey, Kevin, maybe you should try doing this instead of that. Or maybe, hey, why don't I propose working on this way, and we'll see how it goes for a time frame. As opposed to, wow, Kevin, you really don't know what you're doing. I really think you should try this way.
I can't believe I hired you. You are so clueless.
That's a small nuance, but the way people receive a message, you learn over time, not everyone receives the same way. So those were some of the things that went clunky at first. And I, being a direct person, I always thought people appreciated my directness. And I think they do, but how you say things does matter. Yeah,
there's a difference between being direct and being clear. You can be clear and still be kind. In fact, I believe that when we're truly clear, meaning that they got it, we are being kind by definition, right? Because the other mistake people make is the opposite of what you're saying, or one of the other mistakes is, well, I don't really know how to say anything to them, so I don't know what to say, so I won't say anything about the fact they're not doing it very well, right? You didn't have that problem.
No. And I will tell you the thing that I think I'm the most proud of, or the thing that I grew into being the most proud of as a manager, is understanding it's about the people that work for me. If you let those people shine, if you're truly someone who is in service of, and I'll give you an example. I used to tell people, it's my job to get you where you want to go. And if you get where you want to go, I'm going to get what I need. And I really did learn over time that as a manager, if you make those that are doing the work below you shine, it's so much better for everyone. It isn't about me. It's how I get you to feel good about what you do. And hopefully you do so much better that you far surpass me. And then we all get what we want. And that took some time to learn, I believe.
Yeah, everybody wins, right? So for those of you that are here live, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, please share them. I can see them and will share them and perhaps bring them into the conversation with Mark. So Mark, there's a phrase in the subtitle of the book, core values. And oftentimes as organizations, we think about what are our organization's core values, but you talk in the book about our core values as an individual and therefore as a leader when we put our leadership hat on. And so why is it from your perspective that our core values, not our companies, but ours, matter to our team? Talk about that a little bit.
When you work with a team, doesn't matter the size, 2 people, 6 people, 12 people, 100 people. And I grew up listening to this. My dad had the phrase that the classroom takes on the flavor of the teacher, or he used to say the fish stinks from the head. That was his expression. That team takes on the flavor oftentimes of the person leading or managing that team. So if your value, and I'll give you one, if you're an 18-hour-a-day worker and you feel that getting to the office early and staying late is something that you believe is a core belief, that's going to be your expectation for your downline. And it takes a very strong individual to work with someone that's that adamant. And if you had an employee that didn't work the same way, that could be a recipe for disaster. Or if not disaster, which might be to the nth degree, that might be a really rough working environment for someone who
both
doesn't, for both people, for sure.
Right.
Small example of your own belief of, and I'll give you a closer one. My dad used to believe that if you're not feeling well, you go to the office first and get sent home. Well, in today's world, you could argue maybe that's not the best mentality to have. Hey, don't bring your illness into the office. But you also have to be managed by someone that believes that. Because if you're managed by someone who believes you come in first, and if you're not feeling well, I'll send you home, that again can cause, and again, small examples, but that again can provide a little bit of conflict and a less desirable working environment. Just again, another small example of where your own personal values emphasized on your team can have some very big effects, both positive and negative.
We were talking with Mark Williams, the author of the book Lead, Don't Manage. Here you can see it. And so, Mark, another one of the areas in the book that I really liked was your chapter about leadership alliances. I have long said that being a leader is a pretty lonely place to be. People that haven't been one or aren't one don't understand that. Let's talk about this. I actually love this way of talking about it, and I think it's one of the things in the book that perhaps is the most uniquely stated of anything. So let's talk about why it's important, what you mean by them, and how we build them.
Sure. So I did get the benefit of working in a very large organization, insurance company, 2,000 employees, lots of different divisions. And everyone can agree that at certain points in time, you need other departments or other leaders to help you accomplish your job. So for example, I worked in sales, but oftentimes some of the people I was helping or servicing needed help in new business, totally different department. But of course, I wanted to provide the solution. And oftentimes me having a very good relationship with the people running new business granted me the ability to get things done because they liked me, because I knew them, because I cared about their people and their teams. So sometimes it's a favor, a true shoulder tap where I'm saying, hey, I'm in a pickle. I need some help. Can you help me do this? And because they liked me and because we had a relationship and because I cared about their employees and their employees knew it, putting my request at the top of the stack was a huge benefit to me. Super small example of how me having an alliance with someone from another department allowed me to accomplish something that a different manager in a different department who wasn't quite as, I'll say, well-liked, couldn't accomplish the same things I did simply because of those alliances. Again, small example, but we all know we need others to help us get work done. And the more alliances you have, the better off, in my opinion.
And so what that's saying, I think, to us, and I'm going to ask a follow-up here in a second, but what that's saying to us is that if we don't invest the time in those relationships, we don't reap those benefits. And at the end, everybody's winning, right? It's helping you, but it's you're going first and offering help to others first. And by doing that, you're creating a win for everybody.
You bet. You bet.
So as you're describing all of that, I'm sure that many are thinking about it, and whether they're watching us, this is live on near the very end of March 2021, but we also know that it won't be till June until we put it out on the podcast itself. By the way, everybody, another reason why you should sign up at remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn or remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook, because then you don't have to wait for 3 months to hear more of these. But the point is, at this point in time, we still got people working remotely. And so I want to talk about that more broadly, but as it relates to this, what's your advice if the people you want to build alliances with, you don't see in the parking lot, you don't see in the coffee room, you don't see in the cafeteria? What is your advice for doing that then?
Yeah, great scenario. And especially now, and I would say not only with alliances, just with your teams, you have to make a concerted effort to reach out. Now it's even more important. And I would submit that today people are probably more open and receptive to you reaching out. I tell you, I think they want you to reach out because they do feel somewhat isolated and lonely. But make it a point that once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, you're reaching out to someone in another department that you don't know. If you don't know them at all, introduce yourself and explain what you do and that you're part of the company and you just wanted to understand and work with them better. If you do know them, just reach out and say, hey, how are things going? Let me share a little of my experience with my team remotely. And is there anything that I can do to help you? Are there tips or tricks or things that we do that I could possibly share, and vice versa? Everyone loves to talk a little bit about what they do and what they do well. And now is a time that I think people are very receptive to reaching out. So specifically to answer your question, Kevin, make it a point to reach out to those that you don't know or don't know well enough. And they'll be very receptive right now to fostering that relationship.
I think that last point is so important and so true. Like, all of us are feeling some isolation. You're not the only one that's feeling it. And so when you become the hero by being the person that reaches out to somebody else, right? The other person says, man, that Mark's got it going on, man. Like, he reached out to me. I really appreciate that. And it's not like that's in the front of their brain, but that's a win. Everybody wins. Again, back we're saying that for like the
everyone. I believe that everyone, whether they say it or show it, appreciates kindness, especially random acts. If I sent you a card, Kevin, for no other reason, not your birthday, it's not a holiday, and you receive a handwritten note from me saying, hey, I was just thinking about you. Hope your world is great. If you need something, I wanted you to know I'm here. If I sent that to you on a Tuesday afternoon and you go to your mailbox, the smile will be from ear to ear. And the next time you see me, whether it's 3 months, 9 months, or a year, you'll remember that me reaching out. That's something you can't buy.
100%, everybody. And we ought to be making sure we're doing that regularly with our teams as well. We've been talking about this largely in terms of folks outside of our team, but you mentioned that earlier. I want to go into this sort of remote and hybrid thing. I mean, some of this, I mean, you and I talked just before we went live about what you're doing at Brokers International here, and what do you think the future is going to hold. But I'm going to, because I know that, March, June, and we don't know when everyone's going to be listening. I would just give you the chance to say, what do you want to whisper in our ears as leaders about how we lead remotely and or in a hybrid model in the future? Like, what's your advice to us moving forward in something that doesn't look like everybody in the office?
Great question. So first is, I think it's super important today to have an open mind about allowing things to evolve and change. We make 32 years in the business. I have gone to an office every single day, literally every day. And the past year has taught me we can accomplish things from home. It's not perfect, and we feel a little less connected. So number one, keep an open mind. And my mind has shifted greatly from where I was even 18 months ago about working remotely. So that's number one, keep an open mind. There are many more ways to skin a cat than one. Secondly, you have to be conscious, and we just mentioned it, about reaching out and keeping connected. What people have lost is that connection. And if you can recreate it, even like this, I've never met you, Kevin, but now I see your face, I see your expression, we're having a nice conversation. We feel connected way more than we did before 45 minutes ago.
That's a fact.
So that even this little bit of connection goes a long way. So create that connection, but you have to be purposeful about it, for sure. And it has to be regular and consistent, much like rewards and recognition. If you do something on a, half-baked, infrequent, people aren't used to that. So this working remotely requires, maybe it's a team huddle every morning for 10 minutes. If nothing else, just to check in over Teams or, whatever media you're using. Maybe it's once a week at the end of a Friday where you have a team huddle over Teams and you talk about the week. But it has to be purposeful. It has to be on a regular basis and consistent. Those are the ways to succeed in the future, because I think there's going to be a lot more of this, not a lot less. And in fact, that's one of the things we're doing at Brokers International is introducing new remote working policies to provide people more opportunity to work like this. But it does require different management skills and much more leadership in an environment like this. But I think those are some of the ways that we can do it.
So I put Joe's question up here. He says, "What is some?" And you've answered this in part, but I want to just call it out and see if there's anything you want to add in answering Joe here. What advice would you give to new leaders when trying to balance lead versus manage, especially in the new remote world? Anything you would add to what we already said?
You bet. Great question, Joe. So number one, thank you for writing in. We really appreciate it. But more importantly, as a new leader, I would sit down with my new team and I would describe the rules for working with me, or how do I work? What are my expectations with respect to communication? If I sent you a text at 6 p.m., am I accepting a response? What are my rules for when you're out of the office? What are my rules for how do you check in with me? So define, especially as a new leader to your team, define your expectations, whether that's working remotely or in the office or both, so that your downlines, the people that are working for you, understand specifically what you want. So that's number one, really important, and make sure they understand it. Also provide them an opportunity to mess it up. Hey, this is something new. I'm a new manager. I have new expectations. They're not used to the new management. So you have to allow people to make mistakes. And I have an expression on my wall: if you're not making mistakes, you're not working. Just don't make the same ones over and over. So I think, Frank, again, Joe, great question. I think some of it, I believe that 99% of communication issues arise out of lack of expectation or not understanding the expectation. Working remotely requires you to provide your level of expectation more frequently and more often, but I think it can be done. That would be words of advice.
All right. So I have a friend here, Jan Rutherford, who has a number of courses on LinkedIn Learning, as do I. And he's saying that people should take my new course, Planning for Your Hybrid Organization. So thank you, Jan, for that. You didn't have to do that, but I guess I'll say that. Planning for Your Hybrid Organization, and all of those kinds of things that we're talking about. You can do that over on LinkedIn. So all of us that are watching, I'm going to ask a dangerous question of you, right? Because you've been in the insurance business for 25 years, and that business continues to change. So I want you to tell us as consumers one or two things about the future of the insurance industry that we need to know about.
Great.
Okay, so I don't have an hour, buddy.
Really quick. First one, meetings like this. Up until last year, it was very difficult for most insurance agents would visit you face to face. We now have the ability, and most insurance companies allow a sale to be transacted this way. So that's the first thing. The future is already here. So you'll have that. And the second thing is the tools that we have to help you determine what you need, the insurance benefits that might be best beneficial for you in your specific circumstances are becoming more friendly and more easier to use and more easier to understand. Financials are, the financial world can be confusing. And because of the new tools we have, it's making it much easier to understand, much easier to explain, and seek out really good advice. Those would be the things I would say that are changing the business.
Excellent. So I'm going to shift gears as we sort of move into the final curve or turn of our conversation, Mark. And I'm going to ask you, what do you do for fun? Please don't say insurance, filling out insurance. I mean, I'm never going to forget, Mark, the 10-year-old presentation about how to fill out life insurance form.
I do not do that for fun, although I appreciate that. I like to tinker on cars. So I own a 1939 Ford pickup that I mess with.
Nice.
I own a 1982 Toyota Land Cruiser that I mess with. So I like to tinker when I'm not spending time with my family. I like to tinker on cars. And a little bit of exercise. So those would be probably my things for fun. And I read a ton.
Which is my next question. And I know that you do because we talked about it briefly before we went live. So what are you reading right now, Mark?
So I am a huge fan of mysteries because as I read them, I like to try to figure them out. And one of my favorite authors is by the name of Harlan Coben. And he has a whole series of books. And the one I am reading currently is called 6 Years.
6 years by his last name. Harlan, what was his last name?
Coben, Coben. And he has a couple movies that are out now as well. So if you like murder mysteries, I highly recommend him. He's a great read.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So now I have a question before we wrap up, everybody. I have a question for all of you, whether you're watching us live or you're watching or listening to us later. The question is, now what? What are you going to do with all of the insights, all of the ideas that you got over the last 30 minutes? What action are you going to take? Because if you don't take any action, it really won't have been worth a whole lot more than watching, I don't know, Ted Lasso or whatever. Like, the point here is to take some action. Learn, fine. Be inspired, fine. What action will you take? Whether you're thinking about that as a new leader for yourself, supporting the new leaders in your organization, whether you're thinking about that in terms of thinking about your core values and how they play out in your work, whatever that might be from the long list of things that we talked about, the challenge to you is to take some action. So, Mark, where can people learn more about you? Where do you want to point people? And I'm going to hold the book up for the people watching one more time.
Sure. So,
where can people learn more, find out more about you, etc.?
Yep. Lead Don't Manage is on LinkedIn, is on Amazon. So please go to Amazon. You're more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's Mark Williams @BI, which is our LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as well. Or come to brokersinternational.com, BILTD.com. And I also have my own website, markwwilliams.com. So plenty of places to reach me. Love to have a chat with you. So please reach out.
All right. Mark, there it is. There it is on the screen, markwwilliams.com. All that you want to know about Mark can be found there. And as he said, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. Please reach out and connect with him. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you. I enjoyed our short chat before we got started, and certainly have enjoyed our time and appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you very much for having me. This was fun.
All right, everybody. So this episode has been brought to you by The Long Distance Teammate. Stay engaged and connected while working anywhere. Go to longdistanceteammate.com because there's a big difference between working from home and being a member of a successful remote team. And with that, everybody, we'll be back here next week live, same time, noon Eastern. And we'll be back next week wherever you're finding this podcast, right here on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.